Hello and welcome to the role of technology in managing LTL freight spend. My name is Michael Levins. I'm Group Editorial Director for Peerless Media's Supply Chain Group, which of course includes Logistics Management and Supply Chain Management Review magazines. And I'll be your host for this session that's being brought to you by Banyan Technology. Now, as the carrier capacity crunch continues, more shippers are looking to the less than truckload market to transport their goods. And as all of our attendees are aware, 3PLs and shippers are wisely entering this space as well in an effort to maximize shipments and visibility. Now, today, Renee Rubino, Director of LTL Strategy at Banyan Technology, and Steve Leggett, Jr., Solutions Engineer at Banyan Technology, will be leading us through a discussion with Pat Murray, Supply Chain and Logistics Manager at Skidmore Sales and Distributing. Now, that discussion is going to touch on the current challenges facing the LTL market and the strategies that shippers and 3PLs can implement to help them successfully enter the LTL market and create efficiencies that will improve their freight management processes and, of course, lower their spend. Now, just a couple quick notes before I turn the podium over to Renee and Steve. We're going to have time for a Q&A session today after the conversation, so please make sure to submit your questions at any time while the team is going through the conversation with Pat. We're going to get to as many as we can following our discussion. However, if we don't get to your question today, we're going to move your question over to our panel, and they'll be able to respond to you via email following today's event. Now, we're going to get things rolling, and Renee is going to kick us off. Renee, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. I have 30 years in LTL transportation and supply chain management. Most of my career was spent on the LTL carrier side, split between project management and sales before I joined Banyan Technology, where I'm able to use my tenure and my experience to help clients leverage technology to manage their resources and working capital. Steve, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Michael and Renee. This is Steve Leggett, Jr. I have 26 years industry experience, everything from operations to managing a large freight spend for commercial shipper with 19 locations across the U.S. and Canada. Used a lot of technology to manage that freight spend, and over the last 5 years have been heavy working into the technology side.
Michael, I want to thank you for hosting us today. As you know, supply chain entails a lot of moving parts. While we may touch upon many of those moving parts, our primary focus today is the role technology plays in managing LTL freight spend. So let's take a closer look at LTL. At the end of quarter one, the LTL market was estimated to be $43.6 billion and growing. And it did just that in quarter two, as LTL carrier earnings reported for the second quarter reported profitable growth. Earning calls were filled with reports of year-over-year tonnage and revenue growth, improved operating margins, and forecasts of continued pricing discipline through this year and into 2022. So how do we keep continued pricing discipline from impacting our supply chain budget? Well, many businesses are exploring and adopting a wide variety of technology with an emphasis to automate manual processes throughout all stages of the supply chain. They're investing in automation to ensure pinpoint visibility to inventory and product, to create efficiencies in their operations, and to wow customers. All of this while keeping their freight budget in check. Which is why I'm so excited for today's discussion with our guest, Pat Murray of Skidmore Sales and Distributing. Skidmore is using their supply chain expertise to help their customers single source ingredients, which gives Skidmore a competitive advantage in their industry. Pat Murray is the Supply Chain and Logistics Manager at Skidmore Sales and Distributing. Skidmore is a leading distributor of ingredients for food processors and manufacturers in the U.S. Pat, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for joining me on the call here. I've joined Skidmore in early 2018 after about a 12-year stint in the Army. I got bit with the logistics bug in my final few tours of the military. And since then, I've got about 25 years of experience in all modes of logistics, from heavy haul to LTL to courier. So bringing those skill sets into Skidmore has been a challenge. We do everything we possibly can to take care of our customers and make sure we deliver on time. And Skidmore is a fantastic place, and it's definitely, we take everything we can to help our customers out.
Great. Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you now to get us started.
Thanks, Renee. Pat, thanks again for your time. Thanks for joining us. I'd like to get started here and talking a little bit about technology. So, technology has always had a presence in the industry. However, in the current environment, it seems like everyone's looking for some sort of platform or technology resource to help with their specific struggles, stress points, and just to help them stay ahead of the game, right? So, Pat, in your day-to-day, how are you guys using technology to manage the LTL side of your freight spend?
So, we do everything we can to deliver on time to our customer. We have done an integration between the Banyan technology platform and our ERP platform, and our IT guys have built an interface where we can gather that data real time on the customer service representatives' desks. So they don't have to jump to different screens. They could see the current status of where the shipments are, and the TMS integration helps us make the best choice for the value carrier that can deliver on time to our customer.
So besides, the customer side, how's the usage of tech either impacting positively or negatively the freight spend, the actual cost side of your LTL?
So in using the interfaces that we have built, we're able to choose the lowest cost carrier to move the lane for our customer. We also take into account the time of transit, so we make sure that we delight our customers at the end of the day. And the tracking and tracing saves our customer service team hours of time by having all the information located right on their ERP screen, and they can answer questions to the customer as quick as possible.
So you had mentioned transit and feedback to your customers. Are you getting that through any specific type of tech, or how are you making that available?
Sure. So the integration that we have with Banyan, it provides the API data right from the carriers to us. So we've tied all of the shipping parameters into a customer order, and we have interfaces that gather data every 30 minutes to an hour. And as long as it's real time, that's what our customers asking us for. So most of the time they're trying to hit a production schedule, and as long as the carriers are providing accurate data to us, we're providing it right to our customer as quick as we can, usually on the same phone call. We don't have to call back. Everything is right there in front of the customer service rep. Great.
So let's move over and talk a little bit about capacity, right? So, anyone operating in the current freight marketplace is aware of capacity issues and a number of constraints that are contributing to the capacity issues. It continues to grow, right? I mean, we're seeing everything from driver labor shortages, which, that one's kind of been around for a while and doesn't seem to be correcting itself at all. Backups at the ports. Home deliveries are an all-time high with the rapid growth of, e-commerce, and everyone constantly shifting modes, right? Is it LTL? Is it FTL? And it seems like we just kind of passed the capacity problem from one mode to the next. And then I don't know if we even dare to mention shortages driven by the pandemic, right? So what strategy or changes has Skidmore made to try and combat the network shortages?
So what we've done is kind of through the interfaces that we've built, we can turn on and turn off carriers. Within our ERP, we can put a max pallet or max weight parameters into our call to the carriers. So as our carriers get in contact with us with their challenges. We can't take anything over 10,000 pounds, 15,000 pounds. We could adjust our ERP system to only return to the customer service rep the carrier base that can manage that shipment. So we're not challenging the carriers with shipments that they can't handle or they don't want to handle. A big one is for the purchasing agents on my team, that they're trying to get pickups made all over the country. One of the challenges we have is when we get a confirmation date from a supplier, and the supplier they have a shortfall, they have a miss. Well, we can go in and we can either rebook with the carrier, or we can just choose a different date, cancel the shipment, and move on. One of the neat things that we have here is our IT guys have created a booking monitor. So if we have a miss with one of the pickups, we see that the next morning. My purchasing agents will open up the screen, they look at their booking monitor, they see what was missed, and they can take action immediately. That's the biggest piece that we save time with, and we can only manage our exceptions and not have to try to see what happened or what didn't happen. It's all at our fingertips.
So you had mentioned it a little bit, but are you seeing a lot of embargoes from carriers, either by, shipment characteristics or maybe region, lane, and is that specific to a certain mode, or is it seen to be across all modes?
We're seeing a lot of the heavier weight embargoes. There's about 15% of our shipments are over 10,000 pounds. So the carrier base has gone to some temporary embargoes. Some have just flat out said, we're not going to do this anymore. It goes into the relationship with the carrier. And as the carrier feeds us those parameters, we can get into our ERP system and set the ERP system to don't tender over 10,000 pounds to a carrier. That's pretty much it. We've also seen our truckload modes drop from the dedicated lane percentages drop pretty dramatically, just because there's not enough cargo out there to fit on a truckload anymore. So we have to rely on the LTL market to move our goods into us to do the distribution.
Good. So it sounds like you guys have, put a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of technology into it. What kind of successes have you seen with your changes?
So we're able to pull carriers off a certain lane, certain states for pickup. That's the biggest one right there. So we're not putting effort into something that the carriers just won't do. The other neat integration point that we have is that we can go from we can change modes very easily. We could go from an LTL mode, we can flip the mode within our system to a truckload rate, and if we don't have a truckload rate established with a carrier at all, it flips over to a drive away or a spot market. And because the market is pretty well tied into spot versus dedicated lanes, we're seeing some increased costs, no doubt, as everybody is in the industry right now. But we're able to catch the best carrier, and the hope is we can be somebody's backhaul to get the goods back to us. That's all seamless for the customer service or the purchasing agent teams. Before, that was all by phone. Now it's all right at their fingertips on their desktop.
Nice. So let's jump over a little bit into transparency. Carrier network, shipper network demands constantly shifting, driving an ever-growing need for transparency that would allow shippers and carriers to collaborate together and drive mutually beneficial solutions. So, business relationships and data sharing, now more than ever, will play a huge role in success for both sides in that transparency, right? So, how are you using data and information sharing to grow your business and relationships with your carriers and, probably more importantly, your customers?
So the information, I guess, is only as good as what's provided to us. So I know that the carriers have challenges out there, and for our base, I just ask that they're as upfront with us as possible so we can let our customers know. Always that adage of deliver the bad news earlier so people can make adjustments to what they're trying to do into their production schedules. So we rely on the carriers to be upfront with us and tell us exactly what's going on. The data that we use that comes out of our system allows us to modify our truckload lanes like every 90 days so we can catch rates that are good for carriers. We understand carriers come and go, lanes come and go. Everybody's business is kind of in flux right now. So as we do a 90-day bid, we can query our system to see where we move the truckload. We can check the frequency, and those are what we let our truckload base know that we have challenges on and that we need to redo bids. So the data is pretty key. We're looking at a lot of the embargoed loads based on the LTL data that comes back, and that just gives us a better picture of how to plan going forward. Then we also pass over our costs over to our sales team as well, so they're aware of what's going on in the market too, because sometimes logistics is a black box that numbers just pop out of, but my team and I try to give the best visibility of what's going forward in the industry today.
Yeah, so, you talk about transparency and you always hear these things like the new norm, right? So do you see this type of transparency and data sharing and collaboration as a long-term continued need? And do you see any additional needs and gaps that need to be addressed in transparency?
For the most part, the relationships that we enjoy with our carriers are very good. We exchange data on a regular basis. We look at what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And then the goal is to take, everybody wants to run the lanes that are profitable to them. And I understand that the trucking companies need to make money to stay solvent. And that's a good thing because a healthy trucking company is good for us because then they're delivering on time. So I think that what this age of what we're in right now is only honing everybody's skills and dialing in the data that everybody needs to be more effective in their operations. And that's on both sides of the shipping world.
Yeah, interesting. So, when you talk about honing in your skills, right, I'm sure with transparency discussions, the conversations with your carriers and your suppliers are ever changing, but without giving us away all your trade secrets, any ideas or thoughts that you can share around the particular discussions you're having with your carrier and how data is playing a part of those discussions? Are you sharing more data than you would have in the past, or is it relatively the same? How does that play into the discussions?
I think that we're sharing more data than we were before. Before it was always, you sit down with a carrier, you talk about how things are going. The questions I like to ask are like, am I a good customer to you? Is our business, the Skidmore business, good for you, carrier? If yes or if no, and then why on both sides. The other one I want to know is, are we paying our bills on time? Every once in a while you get a freight bill that sneaks through and there's some sort of issue with it, but we can pull up the data from our system of what we see and what the carrier sees, and that's a good kind of harbinger of how well the data is being processed. Those are the biggest pieces right now. I think it's kind of at a very high level. You talk numbers and you talk data, but then it's very easy to drill in because it's not, I'll get back with you. You click a couple of cells on a pivot table and you can get to the data. These are the pros that are the problem. These are the lanes that are not good. That gets you down to some pretty finite details pretty quick. So it's worked for me. So hopefully it works for others as well.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned those conversations of being a good customer. Are you finding through that data sharing? I guess the best way to ask the question, or not sure the best way to ask the question, are you seeing any shifts maybe in lanes or the type of freight you're giving to customers? Maybe, or not customers, but the carrier. So maybe in the past, this carrier hauled a lane from Chicago to Pittsburgh all the time, but that no longer fits into their network and they're moving to Cleveland to Chicago or something. So are you seeing any shift in the the business and what type of business you give to your carriers?
Yeah, I kind of see them drawing in their network from being like national or super regional carriers into kind of maybe super regional to a regional carrier. Everyone's kind of constricting from what I'm seeing. So part of what we're looking at is, what's a bad lane for one carrier may be a good for another. I think I mentioned that before. And that we ask the carriers to only do the things that are good for them. If they have a customer or delivery point that's very difficult for them, we want the feedback of who, what, when, where, and why is it difficult. Because we can go back through our sales team who are very responsive to some of this kind of stuff of, a food processing plant that is causing us problems and just to find out why. Doing that, we're able to set up like a dedicated carrier because it works better. They prefer one carrier versus another. And then as we kind of dial in and fine tune the network, we're sending carriers into locations that are favorable for that carrier and favorable for the plant as well. So we're down to that type of finite adjustments now, and it seems to be working pretty well. We're getting good results out of those efforts.
Thank you. So let's shift over to visibility. So, with current capacity and service constraints, visibility continues to be a hot topic, right? It's one of the buzzwords of the market right now. And I'm convinced if you ask 10 different people what visibility means to them, you're going to get 10 different answers, right? So to add to that, recent surveys show that only 5% of shippers feel they have enough visibility to keep their customers satisfied. So with such a broad definition of visibility and what it means for, other folks, can you give us a little insight on what it means not only for Skidmore, but for your customers?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest piece about visibility is it's less time searching for information. Everything is now, we talked about this before, everything is on a screen within our ERP for the reference of our customer service team. That's huge. And then we also want to be able to, for our customers, they want to know when there's going to be exceptions. Now, part of our challenge is we're fighting on both sides of the logistics world. So our suppliers are having issues getting products to us, and we're having problems picking them up. There's challenges there. And then our customers are also, they want 100 of something, but we can only give them 80 because that's all that exists. So the visibility for us is kind of on both sides. It's on our procurement side, and the team is doing some great things. Our IT group just fielded a fantastic tool for the procurement team for allocations. And then we go back to what we're telling our customers. We're providing them reasonable expectations of when things are going to be there. And obviously, on the carrier side, we're trusting the carriers are going to give us the best information they have. And then as things change, we can push that information out to our customers, and they'll understand so they can plan their production. The worst thing we can do is have one of our customers plan a big production run, and the ingredients that we provide them aren't there. And we need to make sure the conversations are happening of don't plan on a just-in-time thing anymore, because that's a little bit more of a challenge than it ever has been. Give us a couple days to at least have time to react. And if we need to put something on a hot shot, we'll do it because we want to delight our customers every day, but within the parameters of the world going on right now. So that's kind of how we see it. It's just having all the information in one place at one time, and then being able to update that and talk to our customers about the final delivery of when it's going to be on their dock.
So you had mentioned, you're obviously you're doing a lot of communication with your customers and trying to manage as much of that data as possible. What kind of tools are you using, both internally? Is there any technology tools you're extending to your customers other than your product support team, or maybe it's just them using tools to share? But what kind of tools are you using, and what kind of benefits do you see?
Well, the goal is to get everything into our ERP system. Kind of when I started here, it was if it's not in the ERP system, it doesn't count. So the repository for all the information is there. The sales team has our own set of tools that we're pushing information into, But at the end of the day, what's in our ERP is what counts. And we kind of do rely on notifying customers. There's some emails that go out. There's some other messaging. But most of the time, we communicate with sales, and the sales managers go out and they talk to their customers either via phone or one of these, one of the I don't know, the chat platforms, Teams, or whatever they'd use. And it's the personal touch, and that's what makes Skidmore. We do things to help our customers every day. We're in it with them, and that's kind of how it works here. It's giving the sales rep enough information to have an intelligent conversation and providing that same information to the customer service team when they're talking to the people who are kind of the boots on the ground at our customer sites.
Yeah, so your ERP being the single system of record, so can you share a little bit, has your IT team, your tech team on your side, put a lot of efforts into creating that visibility into your ERP for you?
They are. We've just wrapped up the project to integrate the Banyan platform into our ERP system, and that gets all the data there. Prior to that, it was all a lot of phone calls and paper, which just wasn't effective. Especially when we started going, when all the things happened with the COVID incident going on, and everybody went to remote, it made us put more tools in place to collaborate online or collaborate within our systems. The IT team is doing fantastic work to get as much data into the ERP as possible. There's always projects that we want, supply chain guys, we always want more systems, we want more this, we want more that, but they're putting hours and hours into customer facing projects to help us manage allocations, to help us manage expectations. So all of that together is, the IT team they've just knocked it out of the park with the work that they've done, and they've been responsive to our asks.
So with that, let's kind of shift over to productivity and staffing shortages, right? So you put that effort into technology, and the technology is all about information, data, which ultimately helps you become more productive, more responsive to your customers, right? So while the reported labor shortage continues to affect both productivity levels, and recent studies show that 32% of economists are uncertain when current labor shortage would end, and there are very few that believe it'll be anytime soon or even yet this year. So it seems just about everywhere you go, you don't have to travel far, and you'll see help wanted signs or signs of stress on businesses with reduced hours of operations, reduced product availability, reduced productivity, from the manufacturing sector. Is Skidmore seeing any effects of the labor shortage internally or even within your customers' networks? Is it changing, the way your customers are expecting things from you to meet their changed schedules?
I think that we're seeing it more on the supplier side. There's a lot of challenges on the supplier side. A lot of our suppliers use 3PLs, and the 3PLs are struggling to get enough people to open up dock times to move product and get trucks loaded for us. Skidmore has been the HR team has done a fantastic job of making sure that our positions are filled. The labor market here is pretty darn good, and we've been hiring, and we've been hiring some fantastic people. So the biggest challenge that we see is this is on our supplier sides of trying to get things out of 3PLs and to get appointments. The appointments seem to be strangled right now. Very few appointments. Truckers have had to wait. We're willing to pay demurrage that's reasonable. And then if we do have instances where suppliers or customers are having the drivers wait to get a dock time or whatever, we're taking those back to either the supplier leadership teams or to our customers and just saying, hey, we need to get this truck in and out because this guy's got to keep the wheels moving. So there's definitely some labor shortages, but we've managed it well. And that's kind of where we are. I mean, the warehouse is always could use a few more bodies, right? But we've done very well in managing through this.
You mentioned your supply chains. You know, and even though this may not be totally transportation related, but are you seeing any shift in, you know, regions, areas, even mode that supply chains are operating, and are you having to increase your supply chain by adding new suppliers?
You know, what we've done is the allocation thing is the big struggle right now. We're trying to get products that our customers need and want. We are looking for new suppliers. We had a couple of incidents where, you know, some of the sales folks have gone out to find some new suppliers to take care of our customers. Obviously, the spec of the material is very critical, so it's not just as easy as going to get a different, I don't know, bag of flour than you normally buy. But we've worked our way through it. The biggest thing is we're kind of looking at this on a long-term strategy. If we can get some material that we'll buy a little bit more than we normally would just to have it on the floor because we don't know what's going to happen, so we're hedging a little bit heavy on inventory, but it's all strategic. We bounce that through the sales guys, and if our customers are say they're going to need it and they're committing to it, we're bringing it in-house so it's available to them. So we are doing everything we can to support our customer base.
So, you know, based on our previous discussions here and you know, good conversation, it definitely is apparent and clear that Skidmore has embraced the technology side, and even is pushing, you know, advancements in your own technology to, you know, to cover your needs. So how is technology providing efficiencies in your supply chain, not just internally? We're using more tech instead of just throwing bodies at things. The goal is to have all the information at your fingertips, and there's some other projects that our IT guys are working on. I know they have some things in development right now, and it's all forward facing. It's all customer focused of what we could do to make ordering and shipping easier on our customers. And I guess it's just we're focused on taking care of our customers in this crazy time. Everyone's having struggles, and the goal is to take some of that burden off of our customer base and put it on us, and ensuring our team has the tools they need to do their job. And we have a very open policy of ask for what you need, and we'll see how it's feasible and when we have time to do it. But all the ideas are on the table to try to help us get our job done in the most efficient manner. So I have one last question related to, you know, this particular topic, and I'm very interested in your response. So are you able, or are you even currently attempting, you know, to measure the soft cost and financial impact of your technology investments?
We are gathering. We're kind of redoing our KPI deck right now. To measure that is difficult. Some of that is compliance on use of lowest cost carrier. Some of it is just plain cycle time of what we have in the warehouse. It's become more difficult because inventory turns right now are a very difficult metric, especially because we're building inventory of things that we can get our hands on when our suppliers can do it. We are looking at ways to relook our financials in the logistics world and ensure that we're applying all of the costs to bringing product in the door. So if we have truck orders not used, we're making sure that we are capturing those costs and getting to root cause of why that occurred and then taking action that way. So it's a challenge. It's a really good question. I would say that we're looking at it. We're doing some analysis to see what would be the best way to report out what we're seeing. But I think it's very much in flux today, just as everything else is.
Well, Pat, I'd like to thank you for your time, your insights, greatly appreciated. Really appreciate the conversation. And at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Mike for some questions and answers.
Outstanding job, guys. Steve, Pat, just terrific conversation today, guys. We're going to we have a number of questions that are coming in off the floor right now, so we're going to get to as many as we can the time we have allotted. So let's start with a few questions here. Pat, we got a couple coming off the floor. Looks like they're directed towards your experience and what we had just discussed. Question for Pat, are you seeing a shift from one mode to another? Are there any measurable savings to be seen in mode shifting these days, due to all those challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the one thing that we are seeing is we have a pretty solid intermodal provider, and we do a lot of West Coast to us shipments by rail. What we're seeing is that the costs of over the road versus rail is kind of starting to get to be fairly close. But the interesting part we're really seeing that hadn't been happening or is visible now is going west. Some of our carriers are using the westbound rail, which is causing delays because then you get off the road, you get into the intermodal mode, and then everything. The challenge is that the railroads are having to move boxes and things. That's what we're seeing right now, and we're making that a point that when we book a load that's going west, this has to go over the road. You can't put it on the rail because our customers need it by this date, and we can't afford to inflict a delay on them.
Right. Absolutely. So you're not really seeing any huge measurable savings at this point, maybe here and there, right? It just maybe all depends on what the line is, or what the lane is. Yeah.
What the line is, and it's a lot of seeing because the spot market is so close to the actual contracted lane rates, we're seeing some benefit because we're getting reliability. So if we have carrier A that's always going from Ohio to Utah, that driver is used to that lane, they're used to the customer, and then we're seeing some quality benefits in that. And so we like to keep carriers consistent because we want to follow our company core values and do as we say we're going to do. So if we offer 8 loads to a carrier, they're going to have those 8 loads and they're going to run that load all the time. And so the costs on those have stayed basically firm, but that's kind of what we're seeing.
Yep, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Guys, we have a lot of great questions rolling in here right now. I want to thank everybody in attendance for moving these over to us. These are terrific questions. Another question to Pat. Pat, you talked about some of the driver shortages. We're all feeling that. Do you know of any options in place to sort of counteract the driver shortages and in the fact that maybe sometimes your freight's just not being picked up? I mean, how have you managed through that? How do you counteract that?
We've used the tool I mentioned before with this booking monitor that our IT guys came up with. And if we miss a load, we go back and do the root cause of why didn't it. And what we find is some of the carriers just don't have the right coverage, and then we go through our base and we find someone that does. So again, it's taking all that data that we're getting in the mornings and then repositioning with different carriers. The truckload lanes that we do, we're getting 5 to 8 returns on every spot load we put out. So realizing that there is a shortage and be very cognizant of that, but carriers are bidding on our lanes and they're moving them at, prices that are good to Skidmore. So we're very lucky in that instance. Yeah.
Fortunate situation for you guys. That's terrific to hear. Guys, we have, again, more questions coming in. This is terrific. I want to thank everybody in attendance for moving these over. Pat and Steve, you guys had a great conversation a little bit about data sharing and visibility. And I like what you said, Steve, about, everybody has a different definition of that, right? What is visibility to them, right? If you ask 5 different people, you're going to get 5 different answers. But I'll just throw this out to Steve and Pat, if you guys can jump in on this. The question from the floor is, really, guys, how important is data sharing and visibility today?
I'll jump in on my piece. I think it's just part of an open and honest conversation with the carrier. A lot of our carriers, I look at as their partners. I mean, they're business partners. I don't have, X carrier on staff, but I treat them like they are. And again, we can get down to the nitty gritty really fast with a good data set. So that's what I see. Right. I don't know, Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think Pat, touched on it really well there. One of the things is partnerships, right? And it's not just partnerships on the transportation carrier, the shipper carrier relationship. It's partnerships of your technology, right? When you look at the connections, the APIs, the data sharing, when Banyan has several partnerships with other data sources that allow us to pull all that information in and push it back to our customers like Pat, and it's through APIs, it's EDIs. I think the industry is picking up on right away the importance of bringing APIs into the mix with full truckload, it's something that's really not there yet, but it's growing rapidly, and we're going to make sure we stay on the front end of that.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I like this question that just came in. This is, I think, a little bit more geared towards Pat. And Pat, you did mention that, obviously you guys were coming from some manual processes in your operation. Now, this attendee is asking, hey, Pat, our processes right now are pretty manual, and we're struggling to keep up with orders. Our employees are working overtime. Warehouse turnover is, going through the roof. Excuse me. Where should I start to automate? So that's a great question. What advice would you have for that attendee? Where should you take those first steps in automation?
So we've taken some pretty solid steps within the order entry portion. We've made things easier on our customer service team to maneuver through their screens. But the biggest one that our IT guys just fielded, and we're tweaking it, and it's going to roll out here in the next couple of days. But it's the allocation piece. So our suppliers are putting us on allocation, and they created this tool that allows the team to go in there with the screen open and just mouse click material, and it drops it to orders and it pushes it out to our warehouse to ship, and it has sped up things. It's pretty impressive, but that's where we get it's the internal handling of orders and equipment, internal handling of material and orders to get customer orders out the door faster. That has been the biggest gain for us right now.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Yep, great advice.
Mike,
advice too. Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
I would like to chime in on that one a little bit.
Absolutely.
Pat's spot on. Pat's spot on there, but in order to start managing that stuff, you need the technology, right? So I would recommend anybody that's processing a heavily manual process right now to just start looking at what technology is available, and it's from every side, right? It's from your internal ERP to you got WMSs, warehouse management systems, TMSs, transportation management systems, and how those all integrate with each other and communicate with each other and share that data. That's going to drive your best efficiencies.
Yep, absolutely. Great advice too there, Steve. Terrific. Guys, we have time for a couple more questions. Here's another interesting question, and I'll throw this out to Pat first. And Steve, you can certainly please follow up on this one because I'm sure you're seeing a lot of good stuff happening from your customer base. Pat, where do you see the biggest opportunity for decreasing the freight management costs? Is there any low-hanging fruit there that maybe we should be looking at first?
I'm internally for us, we're looking at the truckload consolidation, taking 3 or 4 LTL shipments, putting on a truck and making a multi-stop. Right. Steve and I are actually pretty well engaged with working on that to field it for our enterprise. Right now it's with a higher percentage of the heavy loads that the carriers don't want. Even if we can get those on a truck and have a driver make a stop, it's less handling, it keeps it off of cross docks, and it delivers it to a customer. And with all the technology on these drivers have these days, we can get a pretty accurate arrival time. So that's the biggest thing that I see going forward. Steve, I don't know I know I keep beating you up over all that, but I think that's, for me, that's our biggest goal here.
Yeah, I think that the transparency conversation we have comes back into play here, right? The low-hanging fruit is really being open and transparent with your carriers both ways, right? You with the shipper with the carrier, and the carrier with the shipper,
Yep.
And it's basically getting the right truck, managing the right shipment. If you're just forcing your carrier to take all the lanes that they don't want just so they can get a handful that they do want, then that cost is going to go up. So, as soon as you can start using that data to manage those conversations and those discussions with your carriers, that's probably the easiest and the fastest way to start finding solutions to freight cost.
Yep. Again, makes a lot of sense. And guys, we've written a number of times about that over the last year. If there is a silver lining to what we've just lived through here, it's the fact that it has accelerated those partnerships and that communication between shippers and carriers and 3PL. So again, we're always looking for silver linings, on our publications and trying to share some of that. But I always felt that was definitely one of them. That's in Pat's story today is really kind of evident of that. So guys, we do have time for one more question. We do need to wrap up. And again, if we didn't get to your question, we're going to capture all those questions. We're going to move them over to our panel, and the folks are going to be able to get back to you via email to answer your question directly. And guys, I'm going to throw this question out, of course, to Pat first, and maybe Steve jump in as well, please. Pat, the Amazons of the world are making it difficult on my company to compete, right? So what advice can you give me to manage customer expectations and satisfaction? That's a really good question. Pat, what would you suggest there?
Yeah, I think it's just staying close to your customer and finding out what they really want. Amazon's great, everybody uses them, but I think it's a little separated. Our sales guys are they're all food scientists. They're just super smart folks. And we're going to the customers and we're engaging with them. And then once that engagements take place, the question that I've asked them to come back is tell us what the customer wants as an end solution. I'm not going to go put a warehouse somewhere, do this or do that. I want to know what they want, and let me craft a solution with our carrier base to meet or exceed that customer expectation. Amazon's a kind of a cookie cutter thing. Skidmore is very custom in the way we handle people and the way we handle our customer base and our carrier base. So I think we have more leeway to delight the customer as opposed to dropping a box on their front porch. Some things that's great. What we do is not sometimes, and I think the interaction between our sales team, our customer service team, and I like to stick the logistics guys and all of our supply chain colleagues in there. We craft a solution to delight the customer, and we could modify that to what they need. That's not just one solution fits all.
Yep, absolutely. Steve, what would you add to that in terms of adding advice to the folks out in the audience today?
Yeah, I think Pat's last comment that he made there of crafting the solution, I think that's kind of where it's at, right? So we know that, the Amazons, the e-commerce is driving more home deliveries to, a market sector that's really wasn't prepared for it, right?
Yeah.
So now you got all these carriers trying to figure out how to get their equipment in, down on 3rd Street to make a delivery on somebody's front porch off the back of a truck.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to come down to, shippers being really creative, looking at other methods of delivery, some final mile, white glove type services, and doing some P&L from one place and splitting it out in another place. So yeah, I think it's just you're gonna have to be creative and really look at how you can get your freight out of that mix with all of that Amazon freight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, partnerships, Steve and Pat, you guys keep mentioning too, that is so vital right now. And again, I believe it has been accelerated over the last year and a half. And that just a great message to wrap up on. Again, we have a number of questions rolling in. We are going to package those up and move them over to our panel. We are up against the clock, so I'm going to thank Renee Rubino, Steve Leggett Jr., and Pat Murray for joining us today. And of course, thank you, Banyan Technology, for making this terrific session a reality today. Well, thanks again, guys. Terrific job on the discussion today, and I'm going to thank everybody for attending, and have a terrific day. Thanks again.